State Government Committee is called to order for our hearing today. Before we get started with hearing from the prime sponsor of one of the bills that's been drafted, and from also Representative Fritz, who originally asked me to hold this hearing, before we hear from them this morning, if I could ask everyone to please rise. And Representative Hill, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Representative Hill. If I could also ask our member secretary, Representative Hill, to call the roll before we get started.
Chairman Metcalf.
Here.
Representatives Dush.
Here.
Grove. Hill here. Knowles. Miller.
Here.
Roy.
Here.
Ryan. Saccone. Sankey. Stats. Walsh. Ward. Wieland.
Here.
Chairman Bradford. Representatives Bullock. Daly. Delicio. Dean. Okay. Dean. Fitzgerald. McCarter. Rabb. Sims. Solomon. Vasquez.
Thank you, Representative Hill. This morning's public hearing is on the Delaware River Basin Commission, and we had held a hearing last year on the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. Actually, two hearings last year. It was part of our four-hearing special on regulatory environment in Pennsylvania. And Representative Mao has worked on legislation as a result of the issue with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, and based on a review of that legislation, thought that it was something that might be of interest to Representative Fritz and others who had some concerns about the Delaware River Basin Commission. So we're asking Representative Mao to give us some opening remarks this morning, but first we'll go to Representative Fritz, who'd asked me to have the hearing. And we'll ask Representative Fritz to give us a few opening remarks, and then we'll go to Representative Mao, and then we'll ask both the gentlemen, representatives, to sit with the committee if they choose to join us for the hearing this morning. Representative Fritz.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and good morning as well to my esteemed colleagues and members of the State Government Committee. Additional appreciation needs to be extended to our testifiers, many of whom traveled a good distance to be here with us in Harrisburg this morning. The aim for this morning will be to illustrate the fact that the Delaware River Basin Commission has strayed from their path in their original intended purpose as an agency. In doing so, the Delaware River Basin Commission has morphed into a dangerously unaccountable and rogue entity that is increasingly void of objectivity. The result of their policy, their actions, and their inaction has truly harmed my constituents and landowners. That damage rendered is made doubly painful given the fact that my landowners are treated differently than those elsewhere in the Commonwealth. The theme today is injustice, hypocrisy, and discrimination. My constituents and landowners do not deserve to be treated as second-class citizens. But that, friends, has become the reality. I urge my colleagues to stand up for what's right. Really, it's that basic, it's that simple. Thank you again for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. The residents of the 111th District are most grateful.
Thank you, Representative Fritz. Representative Mao.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and Acting Minority Chairman McCarter and the rest of the State Government Committee for having this hearing on my House bill today, and I certainly do appreciate addressing this quite needy legislation. House Bill 2222 will reform the way groundwater is regulated within the Commonwealth. Currently, there are several entities that issue this type of regulation, including DEP, the Susquehanna River Basin, and the Delaware River Basin Commissions. This joint authority often requires water users to engage in duplicative efforts in attempting to comply with overlapping regulations, leading to great expense to the water users in our communities. My legislation would make DEP the exclusive authority to regulate groundwater within the Commonwealth and to impose fees, fines, or penalties on the use, withdrawal, or retention of groundwater. Additionally, it would require DEP to submit any new or amended regulations regarding groundwater to the House and Senate Environmental Resources and Energy Committees for the committee's approval before the regulation could be promulgated. Brought to my attention by a small town in Adams County, over-the-top fees for review and re-permitting on wells, which some have been in production for more than half a century, tens of thousands of dollars in fees, which gets passed along to the ratepayers. This is bad enough, but the sad part of the story is that it is totally redundant. The same data which is collected for the SRBC and DRBC is also collected for DEP. When these compacts were created, they were created to regulate usage of surface water so that the users upstream did not remove more than necessary, leaving ample supply for aquatic life and other users downstream. It wasn't until several years later that the SRBC realized that the compact referred to water resources instead of surface water resources. And they got the idea of regulating well water, and also then the empire was born. We have had several hearings on this issue and listened to operators of municipal and private systems complain as to the treatment by their commissions. What was all telling is that we were told by many that they were afraid to testify due to the fear of retribution. These compacts were born with absolutely no oversight from the General Assembly, and they have since abused their authority and amassed a treasure trove. SRBC, at last count, was sitting on $70 million of ratepayer money. These compacts lack oversight, transparency, and accountability that is common in our government agencies. They are not required to adhere to Pennsylvania right-to-know law, nor is it accountable to the Independent Fiscal Office or the Independent Regulatory Review Commission. No government entity should go unchecked. I'll read you two sections very quickly out of the SRBC's compact. Section 1.36 of the SRBC compact states that it is the express intent of the signatory parties that the commission shall engage in the construction, operation, and maintenance of a project only when the project is necessary to the execution of the comprehensive plan and no other competent agency is in a position to act or such agency fails to act. Section 3.2 of the SRBC Compact states that it is the policy of the signatory parties to preserve and utilize the functions, powers, and duties of the existing offices and agencies of the government to the extent consistent with this compact, and the commission is directed to utilize those offices and agencies for the purpose of this compact. Now, I could read you the ones out of DRBC's compact as well. However, that in itself would be redundant because they say almost exactly the same thing. In other words, if there's a government agency that has the ability or is already engaged in this permitting process, there is no reason, nor should these two compacts also engage in it. It becomes redundant, overstepping, and expensive for our communities and our private systems that we have around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, i.e. our constituents all pay the bills for this when it is totally not necessary. And with that, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to share my thoughts on House Bill 2222 today.
Thank you, Representative Mowell. As I mentioned, both of you gentlemen, representatives are invited to sit with the committee if you'd like to this morning to hear testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Our first testifier will be Mr. Kyle Gallagher. He's a plant operator at Appalachian Utilities Incorporated. We thought it'd be good to ask Mr. Gallagher to come in and talk with us this morning. If he's here, there he is. You can join us at the microphone, sir. Mr. Gallagher had testified last year regarding the Susquehanna River Basin Commission issues that he was experiencing and having problems with, and I invited him to join us again to give us kind of a summary of the issues he'd brought up to us in the past to get the members back up to speed and get us back in that mindset that we left the hearings with last June as we start to listen to some of the issues around the Delaware River Basin Commission. Mr. Gallagher, you can begin when you're ready, sir.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your work to correct a very serious problem affecting 3.5 million Pennsylvania residents living and working inside the Susquehanna River Basin. This problem directly affects Democrats and Republicans equally. It affects all citizens that use a public water supply. Appalachian Utilities is a small public water supply company in central Pennsylvania. We maintain 3 PADEP-approved source groundwater wells, roughly 30 miles of water main line, and roughly 1,400 service connections in Avis, Woolrich, and portions of Pine Creek and Dunstable townships. I have provided a copy of our 1997 DEP-issued permit to operate the 3 source groundwater wells that is found as Attachment 1 in my written testimony. Please keep in mind the SRBC failed to contact Appalachian until 2016. Appalachian is a very small company. We have 4 employees. We work very hard to maintain the water system, and we pay special attention to the delicate balance of maintaining the water system the best of our ability while simultaneously keeping the water rates down for our customers. This balance is not easy, and overregulation by the SRBC and the PUC make it near impossible. Pennsylvania residents in the Susquehanna River Basin have had their water rights stolen, and those rights are being sold back to unsuspecting ratepayers, communities, and business owners at a very, very high cost. The SRBC has decided that they own all the water in the basin, and you must pay to use their water. For me to explain everything I have discovered about this commission would take about 4 hours. So please take some time to read my original June 2017 testimony and this new 2018 testimony. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions. I would be happy to schedule a private meeting at a date, time, and location that is convenient for you. My written testimony will convey our terrible treatment and awful ongoing experience with this out-of-control government entity that creates rules, regulations, fees, and fines without the consent or supervision of any elected official. They make rules however and whenever they choose to benefit themselves, with no voice representing the good people of Pennsylvania. As far as I can tell, we have no voice for Pennsylvania residents, and we are not being represented at all. Appalachian is being forced by the SRBC to perform totally unnecessary science experiments that will not improve the service for our customers. We have no choice. We either pay the commission the $65,000 they demand for their extremely expensive application fees, and then go on to complete pointless aquifer testing that could easily exceed several $100,000, or we will be fined a huge amount, or worse yet, it is possible the SRBC will not allow us to use the groundwater wells, which means the community water supply will be closed. If we don't pay up, the community will not have water. If we don't pay off the commission, it will be allowed. If we don't pay off the commission to be allowed to access our groundwater, they will fine us. A very brief history on our communication with this commission will follow. Attachment 2 in my written testimony are SRBC and Appalachian letters from October 24th, 2017 to May 15th, 2018. You will see that they refuse to answer common sense questions. In December of 2016, the Commission issued Appalachian an NOV threatening a fine over $1.8 million to a small water company that supplies water to our small community in a relatively low household income rural setting. October 2017, the Commission offered a settlement supposedly seeking resolution to the problems that they have created for our community. In this offer, Appalachian must pay a $1,000 settlement in lieu of civil penalties. The Commission also offers to reduce our operating capacity in all 3 DEP permitted groundwater wells. A very simple way to explain this offer from the Commission. Imagine you have a water well at your home and you can safely pump 100 gallons per day for use in your home. The SRBC comes knocking on your door and informs you that all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, from now on, you can only pump 50 gallons per day, and they will fine you if you go over their limit. They are reducing our operating capacity so far that if we have a mainline break and we need to replenish the pressure-sustaining storage reservoir, they can fine us for doing that. They can fine us for properly operating the water system with DEP permitted wells. They can fine us if we do our very best to quickly and safely refill a storage reservoir that not only provides drinking water, but is a critical component to our community fire suppression system. In November of 2017, I responded with a counter-offer where Appalachian could possibly afford their expensive application fees if they apply a 90% discount to the fees. More on this later. I explained that Appalachian has unintentional non-compliance of their regulations, therefore no fine is appropriate in this case. I also ask for a letter to be authored by the Pennsylvania Commissioner of the SRBC to explain the purpose of the DEP permit Appalachian was issued in 1997 and the purpose of the clearly duplicative SRBC permit that he is directing the SRBC employees to force us to do. In April of 2018, the SRBC informed Appalachian that the commissioners have rejected the counteroffer entirely. Negotiations are closed, and that the executive director will be issuing an order in coming weeks. To summarize the underlying message in this letter from the SRBC, Pennsylvania water ratepayers, Pennsylvania taxpayers, and Pennsylvania business owners' questions and concerns will not be answered or addressed by these government employees. The SRBC is a non-transparent commission, and they will do as they please and do not need to explain their actions, decisions, or policies to anyone. May 2018, Appalachian requested to start the application process in the beginning of 2019. So we have time to complete a very important mainline replacement and a fire hydrant replacement this summer. May 2018, the SRBC informs Appalachian that the Commission is agreeable to that time and they will draft the COA. Attachment 3 in my written testimony is an SRBC chart of municipal fees paid to the SRBC from 2012 to 2017. This chart illustrates the highly erratic assessment of fees and issuance of refunds and credits. A neighboring water company to Appalachian received a 100% refund on their application fees. The Elizabethtown Area Water Authority received a 90% refund or credit on their application fees. Many other towns pay everything full price with no discount. SRBC continues to demand that Appalachian pay full price with no offer of a refund or credit, even after we have explained that funding is not available to comply with their unreasonable demands. Attachment 4 is the SRBC regulatory program fee schedule. In my June 2017 testimony, I point out that this commission is openly prejudiced against all private business, even if the business performs the exact same service as a municipal equivalent. I have received no explanation from this commission about why they do this. Attachment 5 is an SRBC response to questions I had in my June 2017 testimony. The second sentence of the document is, quote, SRBC is providing responses so that Mr. Gallagher and committee members have all the information they seek, end quote. That was a nice attempt, but the document is full of misleading and untrue information, and they never sent it to me. I had to run across this document while talking with people about these many problems. They never sent me a copy of this. I would also like to know who wrote it. The author did not bother to put his name on it and claim ownership of the document. In the closing of my written testimony, I have a number of unanswered questions for your consideration. It is well documented in my letters to this commission they refuse to answer or have any discussion on common sense questions from the public about what they are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Questions from any of the members? Representative Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gallagher, I just have a question related to, do you have any dealings at all with the DRBC? Because your testimony seemed related to just SRBC.
Correct. It's only related to the SRBC.
Yeah, as I explained, as we started the hearing, we were having Mr. Gallagher back to give the members an overview of what we had talked about last June and to kind of put you in the right mindset there as we talked about what was going on with the Delaware River Basin Commission, which Representative Mao believes that legislation he drafted to address the Susquehanna River Basin Commission may also address some of the problems that some members are having with the Delaware River Basin Commission.
All right, I guess I understand that, accepting that a lot of us were in attendance at the Susquehanna River Basin Commission hearings that we had last summer, and thank you for the refresher. I'm not sure how it applies, but thank you for the refresher.
Well, you will see that the chairman's wisdom in having Mr. Gallagher come will pay off in the end. Thank you. Any other members? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. I appreciate that. The testimony that you provided is very, I think, appropriate for this particular hearing as it relates to the overall issue that I think we face with both of these commissions. The question I have for you is, has there been any attempt by anyone to have a meeting with the members of the SRBC, several representatives? I know here in Lancaster County we had a meeting with the Secretary of DEP and the entire Lancaster delegation, senators and state representatives, and wanting to know if maybe such a meeting could be set up with you. I know members of this committee, several would be interested in attending, having representative of the SRBC present to answer questions directly in front of the elected officials.
I think that would be a good idea. We haven't had any meetings since 2016. I guess we had one meeting at the SRBC office, and that was that didn't answer any of our questions.
Okay,
I'm open to a meeting at any time.
it might be something for you to consider in maybe contacting your particular state representative and others, and sending out invitations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Any other members? Thank you, sir, for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next testifier is Mr. Joseph Adams, Commissioner from Wayne County. Mr. Adams, thank you for joining us. Commissioner Adams, you can begin when ready, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Joe Adams. I'm a Wayne County Commissioner. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and House Committee members. I appreciate the invitation to present to you this morning. I also want to call out our senator and representatives from Wayne County, Senator Lisa Baker, Jonathan Fritz as a representative, and Michael Pfeiffer. They represent us very well. They know the issues, and they are extremely supportive of our constituency. My topic today is the economic impact that the DRBC has on impeding new businesses and growing existing businesses within our county. DRBC was created in 1961 primarily to restore one of America's most polluted rivers, and that's as per the DRBC website. The reports have been dramatic, that there have been 50 consecutive years of dramatic improvement. A large portion of that improvement is due to the upper and central region. Wayne County is in the upper region, and that happens to be the only region that has the DRBC designation of good status regarding dissolved oxygen and nutrients. We in Wayne County are the stewards of good water quality management, and the entire basin is the benefactor. We feel we're being penalized for our good behavior and the resulting good status that we created. The original mission of the DRBC was to restore life to the polluted Delaware River, and that has been met, yet the DRBC continues to increase burdensome regulations and restrictions on land use. And here are some of the examples over the last 50 years. 1977, prohibit and develop any development in the floodplain. In 1986, new regulations on water use. In 1992, high quality designation in the upper and middle region. 1996, 23 new objectives to be pursued. 2003, new flow requirements for aquatic ecosystems. 2008, special protection programs from the Delaware Water Gap to Trenton with additional regulations from Hancock, New York to Trenton. 2009, the banning of natural gas development by inaction. And 2016, proposing permanent ban on natural gas development. We live in a county that cherishes democracy, and that's what is just and fair, as everybody in this room does. It's perplexing to me that the DRBC, when it comes to natural gas development, land use, and all other items that it addresses, has 5 equal votes. Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, New Jersey, and the Army Corps of Engineers, all equal at 20%. Pennsylvania has 50.3% of the landmass, New Jersey 23.3%, New York 18.5%, Delaware 7.9%. Population numbers are even more out of balance, with PA at 66%, New Jersey 24%, Delaware 9%, and New York at 1%. I'm not sure how that's fair and just. PA has 50.3% of the land and 66% of the population, yet only 20% of the vote. That's obviously a topic for a future discussion, but I just wanted to point that out. So if you're a business and you want to expand or start up or relocate to Wayne County, what are you looking for? And I think this is very much so no matter where you are in our Commonwealth. Strong public schools. Wayne County has some of the most outstanding public schools in our Commonwealth. Good and improving health care. Wayne Memorial Health Care Systems, financially strong, dramatically growing, investing in doctors' technology, and in a very large construction project right now. Highway access, Route 84, 81, 80, 380, the Casey Highway, PA Turnpike are all close by. The reliable power grid, we have it, and it's consistently being upgraded. High-speed broadband, which I did a testimony to the Broadband Committee of the House. We're okay in Southern Wayne, and we're very weak up north. Low and stable taxes, we're outstanding in that realm. Strong work ethic. All you have to do is work on a dairy farm to find out what a strong work ethic is about. Reasonable, supportive, cooperating governments and communities, and we certainly have that. Clean air, clean water, plentiful land, which we are outstanding. Access to natural gas pipelines and distribution of natural gas, we are very weak. And then lastly, reasonable environmental regulation, and the DRBC chokes us with no natural gas development, although great economic impact for landowners, as well as other ancillary growth for hotels, restaurants, housing, healthcare, retail, service sectors, and all other areas of the economy. So if you go to the DRB website and click on Watershed Stakeholder Groups and Partners tab, you'll see there are 110 conservation and environmental groups listed with all of their contact data. There is not a single county, municipality, school, economic development group, downtown partnership, chamber of commerce, or any other business listed as a stakeholder or partner. I think that's a little bit unreasonable. So if you want to scare off a new business coming to your community and your county, all you need to do is send them to the DRB website, and you'll see that if you're in Wayne County, all of the things that you are going to face regarding those 110 conservation and environmental groups, and you might choose to take your business elsewhere. The DRBC is so restrictive and obtrusive that it stopped landowners and community from having any economic benefit of natural gas development and distribution. And there are others here to present on the scientifically proven safe processes, so I won't spend any time on that inequality and injustice and the legal issues that surround it. I would like to thank Lisa Baker, Senator Lisa Baker, for sponsoring Senate Bill 1189, which makes this taking of landowner rights and the economic benefits to be recognized as an act of eminent domain and compensate the landowner for the lost benefit. We hope that Senate Bill 1189 gains traction and is approved and funded. It would provide amazing economic stimulus for our county, community, and people. I'll comment on the DRBC regulations and restrictions on other economic engines. It hurts the forestry industry, the construction industry, and the farming industry, and all other related ancillary businesses. Wayne County, at the peak in the late 60s and early 70s, had 1,200 working farms with good family jobs and sustaining community jobs around agriculture, and now we have 59. The next generation of farmers has moved elsewhere to find employment, and much to the contrary of what is out there, Wayne County is actually growing land mass of forests, not depleting it as many of the environmental groups propose. As for economic driver of impact fees on the natural gas industry, which is one of the things that happens when you do allow natural gas development, our neighboring county to the west, which is Susquehanna County, received in 2016 alone $4,863,000, and its municipalities received in 2016 alone $8,284,000, as per the PUC website. Wayne County received $36,000. The money in Susquehanna County can and has been used over the past 10 years for public infrastructure construction, stormwater and sewer projects, emergency preparedness, public safety, environmental programs, tax reductions, information technology development, social service, capital reserve funds, career and tech centers, which Wayne and Pike County do not have because we can't afford it, and other planning initiatives. All of these expenditures drive economic activity, economic opportunity, business expansion and new business, and therefore population attraction, and Wayne County gets none. Obviously, lease and royalty payments from natural gas developers being paid to the landowner has an incredible multiplying effect on economic activity and stability and sustainability for our communities. And again, the DRBC stands in the way of this in Wayne County. Interesting, in the Scranton paper, Sunday paper, there's an article on page A8 called Fracture, and it's somehow related to the Russian meddling now from a standpoint of social media and trying to really fire up the economic or the ecological groups and the environmental groups in our country so that they can maintain a stranglehold on their European, but also all other natural gas markets. Just an interesting article, and I'll leave that here for all of you to see as well. So in conclusion, what's the economic impact of the DRBC on Wayne County and its residents? Here's the harsh reality. We're 59th lowest in income out of 67 counties. We have the 67th fastest declining student-aged population of 67 counties in the state, and there is a definite disincentive to start or move a business to our community. So we're becoming a county that struggles to have our families survive, businesses relocate, people and community to have sustainable jobs. It's amazing to me how such a beautiful place with 9 out of the 11 major factors that businesses and communities need to be outstanding attractors of new business and economic development are not moving ahead, and in many areas are declining, even though we're 1 hour and 45 minutes from New York City and 2 hours from Philadelphia. One of the very big answers in the economic is the economic stranglehold that the DRBC has with its overreaching restrictive rules, regulations that it has on residents of Wayne County. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Our first question will be from Representative Bradford.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the work you do for the people of your county. Let me ask you a pretty direct question, because I think we've talked about some things that are ancillary to the topic at hand. Do you propose bringing fracking to the Delaware River Basin?
I propose that using scientific methods of reasonableness should be applied, as opposed to a complete ban on whatever happens in the future.
You don't support a ban?
A permanent ban?
Correct.
I do not.
Okay. Now, you realize the legislature has taken certain steps. Those of us in the Southeast who obviously draw a lot of our water from the waters that are created from New York, and you folks as well, have very heightened concerns about fracking in the basin. What you believe is the DRBC stands in the way of bringing fracking to the basin?
Do they stand in the way? Right now, they have no regulations, so therefore no natural gas development can happen in the basin. So de facto, they're standing in the way. Yes.
Okay. Have you spoken to the Shale Coalition about what their plans are for Wayne County, what they'd like to do in Wayne County?
I have not spoken directly, but it's pretty obvious that with the people that are sitting behind me, they are definitely more attuned to that. That's probably a better question to ask them, but I have not spoken with the Marcellus Shale people directly.
Mm-hmm. You don't share the environmental concerns that have been raised about fracking in the Delaware River Basin?
Do I share the environmental concerns?
You don't share the environmental concerns that have been raised?
I very much share environmental concerns. We have our family has an 82-acre spring-fed lake that's 62 feet deep. My wife and I are on the deed of over 5,000 acres in Wayne County, and I fly fish, had fly fished the Delaware River hundreds of times. We drink the water right from that lake. So I don't think anybody who is anywhere in Wayne County is looking at not wanting to protect the land and not wanting to protect the water. Right. We live there. I'm a fifth-generation Wayne County resident. There are 7 generations of our family living in Wayne County. The last thing that any of us want to do is destroy the land and the water. And I think that we are the amazing stewards, but I'm also a person who believes that science matters, and I'm also somebody that believes that if there is a track history of other places in the state and other places in the country that have consistently improving water quality, that might be something that needs to be considered along the way as well.
Well, make no doubt, you have a lot of allies and those who believe that science should drive public policy in this room. So don't miss that point for a second. I noticed you mentioned you're an outdoorsman, and I think you may be a member of Trout Unlimited and some of these other environmental groups. Are you aware of what their position is on bringing fracking to the basin?
Sure, I'm very much aware.
And how do you square that with your membership with the proposal you're making today to bring fracking to the basin?
I'm not proposing to bring fracking to the basin. I'm proposing to have reasonable scientific regulations that are based in science. I'm not saying that, and there might be other opportunities for later on in the future. Certainly, fracking is what seems to be your concern, and obviously some of the other environmental groups, but a permanent ban on natural gas development is something that I think oversteps anybody's bounds, because the world changes over time.
No, absolutely.
Are there environmental groups that hunt and fish and everything else that are that want it to be protected from a standpoint of complete banning? I'm sure there are. But then again, I think with Senate Bill 1189, those of everybody who benefits from this, from the drinking water that's primarily created in the north, for all of the citizens of southern PA and New York City and New Jersey, well, that's fine. If you want to I think the basis for that Senate bill, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but is if you're going to permanently ban something, then and there is scientific proof over a 10-year period and a 40-year period nationally that it does not harm, then there ought to be economic benefit to the landowner for taking their land rights and restricting them from allowing them to benefit economically from something that they own. And there's a real simple way to pay for that. I mean, I'm an MBA. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, University of Scranton, 12-year administrator in public school, so I believe in public education, 15-year corporate banker, and now county commissioner. The reality is, if you're going to take something from somebody that has very, very restrictive things attached to it that the rest of the state doesn't have restrictive things attached for it, then you need to compensate people. So take the net present value of a 15-year gas well per square mile or whatever the standard is, and apply a discount rate to it at a reasonable price per million BTU, and do the math, and then say, okay, if you want to take all of the benefit away from economically depriving people of their right, then you need to pay for it. Well, and how do you need to pay for it? Just like stranded costs for the PUC. You take whatever that value drives, $35,000, $40,000 an acre. I don't know what the number is, but do that math, and then assess everybody who drinks from the well water and the public water systems in the Delaware River Basin a monthly user fee, which I think, if you do the math, is less than $20 a month, and do it over a 15-year period, do a bond issue, and fund the people for their economic loss. I mean, one way or the other, either don't permanently ban it, or if you're going to permanently ban it, then provide the economic assistance and the economic eminent domain payment to the people who have had their economic rights taken away and landowner rights taken away.
Right, and I appreciate you're taking a very expansive view of the taking clause, and I understand
Sure.
you have a learned view on that, and I think I would probably disagree. I don't think there's not even an actual taking, obviously, and to the extent regulation interferes with the value every time, my zoning ordinance prohibits me from building a skyscraper. It doesn't mean
Representative Bradford, thank you for your questions, but as is typically what I ask for members to do is to not engage in debate with our guests. They're invited as guests to testify before the committee. So if you have an additional question, that'd be great. If you don't, we do have other questions that need to be asked.
I do, Chairman. This is obviously an issue that we're in this together, and I appreciate those of us in southeastern Pennsylvania have strong opinions on this. You mentioned the issue of democracy ruling on this issue. The population of Wayne County, could you give that to me?
52,000.
52,000. The basin, obviously, you mentioned, is about 66% populated in Pennsylvania.
Correct.
And in landmass, 50.3. And you mentioned that the people of Wayne County cherish democracy. I think that's true throughout the basin. Mm-hmm. I think if one was to take a poll and ask people throughout the basin what their opinion of bringing fracking to southeastern Pennsylvania is, I don't think it'd be in the 60 or the 50% number. I think it would be considerably lower. And as one of those representatives, I think we have sincere concerns about doing that. Obviously, Wayne County is part of our great Commonwealth, and we want to look out for the economic interests of all of our county. But for most of us who get our water, including for our largest city, and for our economic engine, we have sincere concerns. So I appreciate the sincerity of which you're advocating on behalf of your county and your people. I just hope you understand that for those of us in southeastern Pennsylvania who have a sincere worry about our drinking water, that those interests are balanced in this discussion.
Certainly.
Thank you, Representative Bradford. Appreciated that last question. And I think I've joined the commissioner in wanting to ensure that the folks in his county, that their rights aren't taken away because you have a lot of people in southeastern Pennsylvania that might want to outvote them in a survey. I think we still have a constitution that should protect their rights.
Thank you.
Representative Dush.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, Commissioner Adams, I want to thank you. You've done a great job of outlining how the conservation efforts in your district, similar to mine out in western Pennsylvania, go above and beyond what the government does. We have local organizations, things like Trout Unlimited that were mentioned, But something that Chairman Bradford just raised, we are a republic. We are not a democracy. This nation is a republic. When we just pledged allegiance to that flag, it was to the republic for which it stands. Our founding fathers had a unique understanding of things like administrative law and the law of absolutism that was exercised by kings. Professor Philip Hamburger up at Columbia Law School, the Maurice and Hilda Friedman professor, has an excellent article from back in 2014. There are many complaints about administrative law, including that it is arbitrary, that it is a burden on the economy, that it is an intrusion on freedom. The question I address here is whether administrative law is unlawful, and I will focus on constitutional history. I've submitted the
Question.
well, I've submitted it to the chairman. I'd like to have it distributed for the record to the rest of the committee. But my question to you is, do you have any point on whether or not you believe this is constitutional based on the fact that the commission is something that's set up to arbitrarily put these kinds of regulations on local government without any, as you pointed out, there are no elected stakeholders in this process, and yet they have administrative authority and are practicing administrative law?
I'm not a lawyer, as many of you are, but a common sense approach would be, if you are not elected to that position representing constituents, I don't know how, especially when it comes to people who are in different states, have the authority to overstep their bounds and overstep what you do for a living and representing your people. The common sense approach is, to me, it's overstepping, what it was originally designed to do. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to argue constitutionality and any of that. But the common sense and the common person is going to look at this and say, all right, the rest of the state has the ability for natural gas development. It's highly regulated. DEP has done a great job doing so. The Susquehanna River Basin water quality has been improving since the natural gas industry has been there for a lot of reasons. And there's been a lot of economic benefit, not only in impact fees and rent and royalty and leases, but also economic benefit to everybody in the Commonwealth for lower energy costs, which will allow more industry and more employment and lower costs for the taxpayer. So do I think it's an overstepping of bounds? Yes. Do I know the constitutionality and the law? I do not.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask the future.
Thank you, Representative Dush. Thank you, sir, for your testimony today. We had a couple of other members who wanted to ask questions, but we're out of time for this testifier, and they'll be held over for the next testifier if they'd like to ask a question. But thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
For taking time to be with us today and sharing your expertise and your experience. And also thank you to Senator Baker for joining us, and Representative Pfeiffer is also here. And thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next testifier will be Mrs. Betty Sutliff, and she is the UDRBC Secretary.
That is correct.
Thank you, ma'am. You can begin when you're ready.
Okay. I'd like to say good morning to you, Chairman Metcalf, and members of the State House Government Committee. As he said, my name is Betty Sutliff, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I would like to address the double standard that exists between the Delaware River Basin and the Susquehanna River Basin in Pennsylvania with regard to the extraction of natural gas and the injustice of that double standard. As a retired teacher, my first step in preparing for today, of course, was to consult Merriam-Webster and others, with my sights focused on the words unjust and injustice. The definition of injustice is a state of being unfair or unjust. Synonyms are inequity, unfairness, and unjustness. Unjust is defined as not just, not acting justly or fairly as persons, not in accordance with justice or fairness as actions. Synonyms are inequitable, partial, unfair, wrong. I would like to give you specific examples of how the people of my county, Wayne County, are being treated unjustly or with injustice by Governor Wolf and the Delaware River Basin Commission. As we speak, natural gas is being successfully extracted in many parts of Pennsylvania using the technique called hydraulic fracturing or fracking. Governor Wolf has lauded the development of natural gas as a clean source of energy and criticized New York State for their strict stance. The following are excerpts of his quotes. "They're a lot more restrictive," Wolf griped at a July event when asked about Cuomo's policies. "It's so restrictive in New York that we can't even pipe our gas across its borders to New England, which really needs a clean source of energy." City and State, Pennsylvania, May 20th, 2016. "New York's policy is because they are concerned about how advanced the drilling techniques are in fracking to assure themselves that they have a good, clean environment," Wolf said. "But I don't know how you can assure yourself of that without actually doing it and regulating it and overseeing it and making sure you're doing things right." So that's the big distinction as I see it. Their policy is to not do it at all. Mine is to do it and do it right. City and State, Pennsylvania, May 20th, 2016. "I'm a very strong environmentalist, but I believe with the right regulations, the right oversight, and right enforcement that we can do gas drilling," Wolf told City and State last month. "Most people, I think, want to do it, but they want to do it right. And that's where I come down." City and State, Pennsylvania, May 20, 2016. "Governor-elect Wolf opposes a ban, and he will work hard to make sure the process is safe," responded Jeffrey Sheridan, press secretary for Wolf's transition team. "Pennsylvania's natural resources should help the Commonwealth become an energy leader, including renewable energy and energy efficiency, as well as a magnet for investment and job creation," he continued. "Governor-elect Wolf's priority is to ensure that Pennsylvania is an energy leader with all Pennsylvanians sharing in the prosperity. Governor-elect Wolf will work to strengthen the rules governing drilling, increase enforcement of the rules, hire more inspectors, and create a health registry to monitor health issues," Sheridan concluded. Politics PA, December 17, 2014. In Governor Wolf's inaugural address, he said that Pennsylvania has to offer a level playing field, making sure all businesses, all Pennsylvanians have a chance to get ahead, and that all Pennsylvania's families deserve the same opportunities. He also said we need to be willing to listen to each other and learn from each other and work together to give all Pennsylvanians a shot at a great life. He didn't say all Pennsylvanians except Wayne County. On June 8, 2015, along with 6 others, I met with Governor Wolf regarding natural gas development. And what was very telling in that meeting was not so much what was discussed, but what was never mentioned by him, a concern for water quality. The meeting was all about his desire for a severance tax. Saying that the basins are to be treated differently based on their compact, Susquehanna being concerned about quantity of water only and Delaware is quantity and quality of water, is a ruse because the SRBC has been monitoring the quality of the river. And I quote, "The Commission's monitoring programs have not detected discernible impacts on the quality of the basin's water resources as a result of natural gas development." There is water of exceptional quality in both watersheds. So are the people downriver in the Delaware Basin somehow different or more privileged than the people downriver of the Susquehanna, including the governor himself? How can it be that if a raindrop rolls down the western side of a mountain into the Susquehanna watershed, it can be used safely to extract natural gas, but if it rolls down the eastern slope, it can't? The people on the eastern side of the mountain have lost out on an economic opportunity that the rest of the state enjoys. They are not allowed to harvest and profit from what is rightfully theirs. Last fall, my husband and I attended the Harford Fair in Susquehanna County and spoke to many vendors. One vendor who sells farm equipment told us that he doesn't even set up at the Wayne County Fair because there is no money there. Farmers are hurting, and the economic disparity between those who get Governor Wolf's yay vote and those who get his nay vote is unjust. You can see from the map provided of leased land in Wayne County that most landowners favor the exploration of and extraction of natural gas. I actually did the courthouse work that went into the making of that map so that we could plot which companies were leased and in what areas. These same people, the Northern Wayne Property Owners Alliance, NWPOA, of which I was on the executive committee at the time, those colored in yellow, cared so much about their land that they spent over 2 years and $750,000 to construct a lease that was so environmentally protective that it was way ahead of DEP at the time. And it's gone. These folks who did due diligence and put the environment ahead of their wallets have all been released. Especially disheartening is the fact that the members of just the NWPOA, whose lease bonus payments for the second half of the lease, an estimated $187 million, lost all that future income when the de facto moratorium set in and the gas companies left. These folks have already been wronged. For my husband and me, that amounted to $150,000 of lost income, and that's not counting any possible future royalties that we may have achieved. I have 3 sisters who, as a result of inheritance, own only mineral rights to family land. A ban renders their inheritance of those rights worthless. Who gave Tom Wolfe and Andrew Cuomo the right to choose prosperity for some and poverty for others? What is the rationale they use to vote one way in one basin and the opposite in another? Why do they treat the lives of those of us in the DRB with a different standard? Why is opportunity afforded or denied based on which side of a mountain water descends? This discriminatory treatment of a couple of counties in Pennsylvania is totally inequitable, partial, unfair, wrong. The DRBC is operating in a fashion completely the opposite of the SRBC, even though it is composed of the same governing majority of members. How can the very same individuals who sit on the DRBC vote the exact opposite when they sit on the SRBC? Both basins supply drinking water and contain special protection waters. If the SRBC's remote water quality monitoring network has not detected discernible impacts on the quality of the basin's water resources as a result of natural gas development, then what would make anyone think that it would be dangerous in the DRB? All 67 counties in Pennsylvania should be ruled by the same law, Pennsylvania law, and not be superseded by the DRBC and people they never elected. What is good for the vast majority of the 67 counties should be good for all. A complete ban in part of Pennsylvania, depriving Pennsylvanians and others of their rights and thereby rendering them second-class citizens, is a fundamental breach of equal protection under the law and is clearly unconstitutional. I challenge anyone to tell me of another industry that is allowed in all of Pennsylvania, save 1 or 2 counties. I began my testimony with the definition of and synonyms for unjust and injustice, and defended my position that that is how the people of Wayne County are being treated by this administration and the DRBC. I would like to close with a definition of just and justice. Justice, the quality of being just, righteous, equitableness, or moral rightness. Just, based on or behaving according to what is morally right and fair. Synonyms include upright or righteous, equitable, fair, and impartial. Please deal justly and with justice regarding this issue and the people of Wayne County, because that is how the people of Wayne County expect to be and deserve to be treated. The governor and the DRBC need to stop playing politics with our lives and our livelihoods. Once again, I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to represent my fellow Wayne Countyans and speak before you today. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We had Representative Delicio had been on the list for the last testifier. Would you like to ask this testifier a question, Representative Delicio?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I can
You may
do that.
proceed, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Sutcliffe, good morning, and thank you for being here today.
I've been in, this is my 4th term. I've been in the legislature 8 years. What is the, I don't remember hearing from a lot of drilling companies saying that this not accessing Wayne County has somehow been a problem for their industry. Is there any type of published estimate of what type of volume of gas is available if access were permitted?
There are probably people who can address that better than I can as far as how much gas there is there. Is that what your question is?
Yeah,
or
yes.
where it is, or the
One would
location
think,
of it?
I'm thinking that if over the last 8 years, if this were, a hotbed of opportunity for the drillers, that this would be, the cry would be very loud, and I haven't been aware of that. So I was wondering if there is any type of estimate of what's there. I know it's not a part of Wayne County in the SRB.
There were test wells that were done back at the time, and I know some of that is kept totally secret for a period of time. So I'm not sure if there is really, I'm sure there are other people that can speak to that better than I can. But I know as soon as the de facto moratorium came in and they just weren't allowed to work, there's no point in staying there. If they're not allowed to be there, they can't make money, so there's really no point. So if it were opened up again, then, we were told that they would come back.
Told by whom?
One of the companies that we were leased with at the time, or that was, but we, again, because they would want to come and explore more, I would think.
And Ms. Sutcliffe, do you happen to know, is part of the county under the Susquehanna River Basin Commission where drilling would be permitted?
There is a little bit of Wayne County that, yes, that is in the Susquehanna watershed, and it's getting, yes.
And do you happen to know if there's any drilling occurring in that?
It's getting very close, very, very close. And I believe other people could probably address that better than I can.
Close to being able to be drilled or somebody being...
Well, my understanding is, and again, I think there's somebody who will testify later that can probably speak to this better than I can. My understanding is that Cabot, who is, heavily drilling in Susquehanna County, is moving closer and closer east toward Wayne County.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Delicio. Representative Daly, did you have a question for this testifier? Any other members? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. Question, can you, in your opinion, give a synopsis of why you think Governor Wolf has decided to ban in the DRBC?
I can't read his mind or speak for him. It would only be hypothetical. But as far as my own personal opinion, as a teacher, retired teacher, I know some of the talk that has been, and what he said, like he wanted to spread the money out to everybody. And even in his commercials for his next coming election is telling people that what's under the ground in Pennsylvania belongs to all of Pennsylvania, which sounds to me like you're appealing to a voter base. And by appealing to the, I hate to call them environmentalists because I think we are all environmentalists. We're the ones who have been good stewards, and that's why the water is exceptional quality as it is. And again, the people downriver that cry to be the environmentalists, and that's where the river is so polluted. So I hate to really refer to them as environmentalists, but as a political bloc, I will refer to them as environmentalists, and I think it's pleading to that vote and the vote downriver. Although when we had the testimonies to be given, and they always claim that the drinking water, 17 million, every time it grows, it's 15 million people, it's 17 million people that drink the water downriver. But when they went and we had these public comment times, grand total, I mean, we commented in Waymart, they had another one that was closer in Lehigh Valley to Philadelphia. Grand total, pro and con, 218 people testified. So they're looking for, they keep claiming all these millions of people downriver who drink the water who are against it, but where were they? You know, they didn't come out in droves to speak out against it, but I think it, as far as I'm concerned, it's a political issue.
And thank you. And one follow-up question. Your homework here in the quotes you provided from the governor making various supportive statements to this policy, is it your opinion that he could, if he wanted to, ban fracking in the SRBC as well?
I would think that that would be a concern. You know, that, but he's apparently in favor of it, and there with what he said, you know, he's in favor of it, touting it and lauding it. But where would it go if the pressure starts coming from this, what I would call the environmental block?
Good. Thank you.
Chairman, if you would,
Thank you, Representative Noor.
If you would kindly indulge me, I do have.
Ma'am, we don't have, we're in a Q&A period.
Okay.
And I do have a question for you.
Okay.
Because you'd made a comment on how can the very same individuals who sit on a DRBC vote the exact opposite when they sit on the SRBC. So my understanding is on the Susquehanna River Basin Commission that the DEP secretary is by the compact, by our law, the voting member on that commission. Whereas on the Delaware River Basin Commission, it appears that the governor is the chairman of the Delaware River Basin Commission and is a member there on that commission on behalf of Pennsylvania. So some of the issues that we talked about at the Susquehanna River Basin Commission hearing last year was the fact that it didn't appear that our DEP secretary was showing up to do his job at those meetings, but was sending a proxy, and that the proxy had been changed in the recent past to where another individual had been sent as a proxy. My question was, did we allow in the compact or in the law for a proxy and allowing somebody to shirk their duties like that? And it appears that the governor has 3 proxies that he has listed, the DEP secretary, I believe, being one of them, and 2 additional proxies that he could send to do his bidding on the Delaware River Basin Commission. Are you familiar with who's been casting those votes? Has it been literally the governor sitting there casting that vote against natural gas development in the Delaware River Basin Commission, or has it been one of his proxies?
Anytime I have ever testified before the Delaware River Basin Commission, there've always been their alternates. I don't think I have ever seen a governor sit, ever, on one of those.
So he is a designated member, but has proxies. So another reform that's needed, I think, or speaks to another reform that might be needed. If you had a closing comment you want to make to the committee,
if you would just
it'd be
kindly
appropriate at this
indulge me
time.
with one request. This is very near and dear to me as a public school teacher, and I mean, these are my friends and neighbors, you know, the farmers, and we have a small farm too. And farmers work around large machinery, moving parts, and unpredictable animals daily. My own experience, my summers, I'm not the usual school teacher, my summers were spent tedding and raking hay, maneuvering a Farmall M or a Massey Ferguson around woodchuck holes, strategically placed in the steepest part of a terrace or a steep side hill. And my heart would be in my throat on many occasions, wondering if I was going to tip over. And I can think of 3 farmers who lost their lives when tractors either upset on them or got away from them while hauling heavy loads. I know 2 small children in our neighborhood who were run over by tractors. One survived and one did not. The parents of the little boy who did not survive are former students of mine. I know farmers who have lost fingers and limbs to power takeoff shafts. Our next-door neighbor lost an ear. 3 little girls that I taught, former students of mine, lost their dad when the youngest girl was 9 years old and in my classroom. Lost their dad when he was gored by a bull. Farming comes with a lot of risks, but is not banned. And I'm speaking here for the farmers of Wayne County. So my request is this: please do not allow the DRBC to use possible risk as an excuse for banning the production of natural gas. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your testimony today. Our next testifier will be Mr. Steve Tambini. Executive Director, Delaware River Basin Commission. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you. Chairman Metcalf, Democratic Chair Bradford, State Government Committee members, state representatives, and Senator Baker. Thank you for your invitation to address the committee on behalf of the Delaware River Basin Commission. I've submitted my testimony along with several supporting documents, and I'll trust that you'll review it as part of your deliberations. I'll try and keep my remarks as brief as possible to allow time for your questions. Now, before I joined the DRBC about 4 years ago, despite working in the water industry for over 30 years, I was probably like many of you, in that I really didn't know what DRBC was, what it did, and how it fit in with the other multiple government agencies that are out there. Needless to say, I now know a great deal more, and I'd like to briefly share with you some of the rich history of this unique federal and interstate agency and the exceptional results it has achieved. My comments will focus primarily on two areas: providing clean water and ensuring sustainable supply of water for about 15 million people, including about 5.5 million Pennsylvanians. In fact, some 43% of the population of the Commonwealth lives in the Delaware River Basin. Now, I suspect that we all take water for granted a good deal of the time, and with good reason. When we open the tap, it comes out. Water flows. We head down to our creek or our favorite stream, and we cross a river like the Delaware, and it's always flowing. Unfortunately, it seems to take one or more crises for us to appreciate the value of our water resources and the importance of managing them responsibly. The lead contamination in Flint, Michigan, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf, and the droughts in western U.S. are all examples of how sensitive and vulnerable our water resources are and how they can be impacted by both man-made and natural events. History shows us that the Delaware River Basin has its own vulnerabilities. The DRBC was formed after decades of costly litigation among the basin states over water rights. Other states trying to take water that Pennsylvania thought should be coming to them, and severe pollution. That topic was already talked about. And those were crises. In response to these challenging conditions, the commission was created under the terms of an agreement between Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, New York, and the federal government in the form of a compact, legislation that was adopted by the United States and each of the 4 basin states in 1961. So what has the DRBC meant to Pennsylvania? I've attached to my written testimony a paper that outlines the numerous and valuable benefits that the DRBC provides to the Commonwealth. I encourage you to read the detail. However, allow me to highlight some of the DRBC's key accomplishments and benefits, starting with clean water. As was noted earlier, before the DRBC was formed, reaches of the Delaware River estuary near Philadelphia were so polluted that the river lacked dissolved oxygen required to sustain aquatic life. Since its inception, DRBC has provided the science and the leadership for water quality improvements that have reduced pollution and effectively restored the estuary to the point where the river and riverfront communities are thriving, not just environmentally, but economically. DRBC's groundbreaking program to reduce contamination caused by PCBs, a legacy pollutant, a known human carcinogen in the tidal Delaware River, has produced exceptional results working together. PCB pollution loadings from the top 10 dischargers decreased by 76% between 2005 and 2016. The other great news, and for those fishermen, I think you'll see this as great news, in 2018, 2 states relaxed their fish consumption advisories because of improved water quality conditions in the estuary directly related to the PCB effort. DRBC Special Protection Waters has kept clean waters clean in the main stem and portions of its tributaries. These exceptionally clean waters that have been talked about support recreation, healthy ecosystems, a vibrant water-based economy, and water quality improvements downstream. Now, clean water is essential, but as the region continues to grow, will there be enough water for the future? If we experience an 8-year drought, such as the drought that inflicted this basin in the 1960s, the drought of record, will we have enough water? These are challenging questions that the basin faces in order to ensure a sustainable water future. Some of the sustainable water programs and policies include the following examples. Flow management is a critical DRBC responsibility. When you go down to the river and you look at it, it seems like a natural system, but I can assure you, and what most people don't realize, is that during periods of low flow and drought, the flow in the river is managed through releases from multiple reservoirs located throughout the basin. DRBC directs releases from the Beltsville Reservoir on the Lehigh River in Pennsylvania and the Blue Marsh Reservoir on the Schuylkill River in Pennsylvania to ensure flows sufficient to meet local and regional water supply needs and to protect water supply intakes on the Delaware River from the migration of salt water from the Delaware Bay. What's more, the DRBC pays the federal government over $1.6 million annually to support the costs for water supply storage in Beltsville and Blue Marsh. In addition, the DRBC's drought management plans, if we were to see that 8-year drought again, includes about access to about 65 billion gallons of emergency storage from public and private reservoirs throughout the basin. Clean water and sustainable water are our primary objectives. The benefits I've described are just a few examples of how DRBC programs support the vital water resources of the region and of the Commonwealth. Now, it's certainly understandable that those who are regulated by state agencies and DRBC may be confused about our unique roles and responsibilities. DRBC's regulatory programs are not duplicative with Pennsylvania DEP. However, our regulated community is asked to find ways to work closer with state agencies, and we listen. We have worked with the commissioners and state agencies to find ways to improve and streamline the regulatory process. In 2015, we initiated a program called One Permit, One Process, One Permit, whereby under agreement with the state agencies, the DRBC effectively works in the background to ensure that standards are included in the agency's permits, and so that those being regulated have to apply to just one agency and receive a single approval that contains all state and DRBC requirements. Right now, Pennsylvania agencies have not availed themselves to the One Process, One Permit program. However, DRBC is very willing to work with Pennsylvania DEP to initiate this program when and if the department so requests. DRBC has a good working relationship with our regulated community. We strive to be fair, responsive, open, and solution-oriented. We're not perfect. I'm sure you can find some applicant, water user, or wastewater discharger who have not been pleased with DRBC. That being said, based upon the multiple letters that have been advanced to your committee from our regulated community in Pennsylvania, those who understand what we do and those who work with us routinely to provide clean and sustainable water recognize the value of DRBC's water management and the value it's brought to their communities and to the Commonwealth. I recognize that this committee held hearings last year about the SRBC, and from time to time the DRBC is compared to the SRBC, like it was today. I agree that we have similar compact structure, but we are not the same. The Delaware River forms an interstate boundary for its entire 330 miles. The Susquehanna River does not. The Delaware River Basin Compact was structured to allow the states and the federal government to cooperatively address, through the commission, water quality and pollution risks. The SRBC Compact was not. The Basin State Commissioners, as the chair has reminded us, for the DRBC are the duly elected governors of each state. SRB state commissioners are individuals appointed by the governors. All the policies, rules, regulations, fees adopted by DRBC must be approved by the commissioners at a public meeting. Collectively, the governors of the Basin states, including Pennsylvania, decide when DRBC authority should be used to solve water resource issues that affect the basin as a whole. Now, I recognize this hearing may be as much about hydraulic fracturing as it is about DRBC's relationships and interactions with those we regulate. Members of the State Government Committee have heard testimony and are no doubt familiar with the status of the proposed DRBC regulations that, if adopted, would prohibit high-volume hydraulic fracturing in the basin. I suspect your questions and concerns will largely be about that issue. Please understand that although I will answer your questions to the best of my ability, I cannot speak on behalf of the governors who initiated the rulemaking, and I may not be able to answer certain questions that relate to ongoing litigation or deliberative processes. As you may be aware, in response to the rule proposal, the Commission has received nearly 9,000 submissions of comments, which are under review by the DRBC commissioners and staff. The commissioners will not render a decision until they've considered all of the legal, technical, and other issues the commenters raise. DRBC has worked with Pennsylvania and the other basin states to address interstate water resource problems, such as droughts, floods, sustainable water supply, severe pollution in shared waters, protection of drinking water sources, and protection of exceptionally high-value water resources. I mentioned the fact that you receive many letters. I think the count's up to about 30. There's probably more coming from our regulated community. I just want to read from one of them. It's a quote from the North Wales Water Authority. It says, "The Delaware River Basin Commission has proven over many years to be an efficiently and fairly run organization. We readily admit that we've never found this agency to be heavy-handed, uncooperative, or unresponsive to the needs of our organization, or more importantly, to the best interest of the public we serve. We lend our voices in support of the Delaware River Basin Commission and urge the State Government Committee and all of our legislators to continue your full support to this essential and important agency. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning, and I'll answer your questions. Thank you."
Thank you, sir. So at the end of the testimony, you said you cannot speak on behalf of the governors who initiated the rulemaking, that be the ban that's being proposed to drilling in the Delaware River Basin. Did the governors initiate it, or did any one governor attend the meeting where this was initiated, or were they all proxies that were sitting there initiating it?
So the governors typically don't attend the commission meetings. You're correct about that. Typically what the governors do is they provide an alternate to attend the meetings. I can assure you on this matter that those issues are brought back up to the governor's offices. If there's a routine groundwater withdrawal, let's say, I can assure you that those matters are not brought up to the governor's office, and those alternatives are very capable of dealing with those issues day to day. But let me give you a couple other facts. In September of 2017, the commissioners passed a resolution for directing me and my staff to put together a rule-making on this matter. And the rulemaking was, in general, related to a prohibition in the Delaware River Basin. So they passed a resolution for the rulemaking. The rulemaking was presented to the public for comment. Public comment period went, I think, 120, maybe, I think it was 120 days. Went till March 30th of this year, of 2018. And right now, staff is looking at all the comments that have come in. I can assure you that on this particular matter, we've got comments from here to here that we're looking at. And we're looking at all the science and all the data that's been provided.
So when this was initiated, did all the commissioners or their proxies vote in favor of initiating it?
So I'll give you the vote. The vote went like this. There were 5 votes. There are 5 members on the DRBC commission. Federal government was a no vote. New Jersey was an abstain vote. Pennsylvania was a yes vote. New York was a yes vote. Delaware was a yes vote.
So Governor Wolf, through his proxy, voted to initiate the rulemaking for banning drilling in the Delaware Basin, which extends up into the northeastern part of Pennsylvania.
Yes, Representative. Yes, Chairman. Sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate your clarification. President Daley is still had on the list. Were you interested in asking this testifier a question? I had you on the list from testifier before last, but kept you there in case you wanted to follow up with a question and be first on the list.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't expecting that, so, but I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other members?
Oh, I was going to ask a question.
Representative Daley.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't make that really clear. Mr. Tambini, thank you for your testimony. And as a resident of Montgomery County, I was pleased to see that the Montgomery County Planning Commission was one of the organizations that did submit a letter espousing to the long-term relationship that we have had. And I think that it's, you know, as someone who lives in the Southeast and considering myself an environmentalist, I actually am grateful to those folks who are in the northern, parts of the state where the headwaters start. I also have creeks that go through my community and flow into the Delaware River. So, you know, we take our watershed really seriously where I live. And I think that one of the concerns, if I can speak for people that I represent, is that they really are interested in this rule and how it's going to be determined, because it's water that we drink and it's our area and it's a shared resource. It's not something that's static. And I think that being downriver, you're always aware of what's coming from upstream. And so can you just go over again the differences between the SRBC and the DRBC in terms of water quality and how that is a part of the DRBC mission?
Sure. And I think it starts with the river itself, because hydrologically, geographically, they are a little bit different. No matter where you stand on the Delaware River is 330 miles long from the ocean to the headwaters. No matter where you stand, you're always, if you stand on one bank, you're always looking at another state. So think about that. There's inherent conflicts, potentially. There's potential issues. I gave an example about cleaning up PCBs. We work with all the states in the estuary to clean up PCBs. But if, I'll get to your question, but if for example, Pennsylvania DEP wanted to clean up the PCBs in the Delaware River estuary, and New Jersey didn't, and there were landfills in New Jersey that were leaching PCBs into the estuary wouldn't be clean. So it's truly an interstate water from end to end. And I think, as has been talked about more than once, the compacts were set up a little bit differently. The compact for the Delaware River Basin Commission specifically talks about the commission's role in abating and controlling existing and future sources of pollution. Whereas the SRVC compact, when it got to the point in their compact about water quality, yes, they do have a role in terms of monitoring water quality, but it clearly talks about deferring to the states in terms of water quality jurisdiction. So the jurisdictions are different in the compacts. And I think that's, when it comes to water quality, that's the primary geographical difference, legal difference. Again, I think I tried to give examples where you might say, well, Pennsylvania DEP can handle this, but you've got another state, whether it's New York or whether it's New Jersey, right across the way. And it does give Pennsylvania an opportunity to work in an interstate matter to control all the sources of pollution. I know that there's a laser focused on the hydraulic fracturing issue at this hearing, but the way this is approached typically has been to do it in a way that controls the pollution throughout the watershed.
And can I just, one very quick follow-up. It's just about, I know that a portion of the river is designated as a National Wild and Scenic River System. Does that bring an economic benefit to the states that are along, or to the areas that are along that
So I'll qualify by saying
designation?
I'm not an expert on that specific matter. Yes, there is an area from Trenton to the headwaters that have been classified as National Wild and Scenic. And I'm sure that if you had people here from national parks and state parks, they would suggest that classification and what goes along with it to make sure those waters are healthy does have some economic benefit, but I'm really not an expert in that.
It'd be interesting to know that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Tambini, for your testimony. I applaud the DRBC for their one permit program. I found that interesting in your testimony. I appreciate that. I think that's helpful for all involved. A question I have for you in regard to the governor's direction that in the vote that there'd be a ban on hydraulic fracturing. Do you agree with that opinion?
I will say that my opinion doesn't matter in any of this. I work for the commissioners. So what we do as a staff, what we do technically is give them science, give them advice, provide information to them. My personal opinion about none of this doesn't matter.
In regard to the SRBC, since you're not in that region, do you think that hydraulic fracturing should be banned in the SRBC region?
Again, that's not for me. That's nowhere for me to, number one, that's not an area that I even work in. And number two, that has nothing to do with my position or my opinion.
Well, you would be free to comment on that since you're not in that region.
I'm not going to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Good try on the second question. Good answer. Representative McCarter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you, Mr. Tambini, for your testimony today. We've heard a lot today about economic impact, obviously, in Wayne County in terms of what happens, and I know Representative Daley alluded to this as well, but through that whole of the 330 miles of the river, many other industries and many other businesses have been impacted by obviously the change in the river from back in 1961 to the present day. And, I for one, have surely benefited from the opportunity to canoe on a river that is scenic and also to tube on that river as well at various times with my grandchildren. And I know that many other businesses have sprung up along the river and also down toward the Delaware estuary as well have developed as a result of having that clean water and the development that's happened over those years. The economic, it seems to me, and I'd like to hear you comment on the economic impact overall that has taken place since we've seen this development over the past almost 60 years now.
Sure, and I think a lot, if you take the time to read some of the letters that you receive from some of the municipalities who run the river, the planning commissions, who know the value of water resources, to the economic development of the region, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, You can see it, if you visit it, you could see it as well. It's been an amazing transformation. We talked first about the severe pollution in the estuary, and that's been an amazing story of recovery. Yes, over the years, after DRBC, certainly EPA and Pennsylvania DEP and New Jersey DEP and DENREC and Delaware have all helped to work together to restore the Delaware. But DRBC has always been in a leadership position. In fact, still today, the standards we set for the interstate water are set by the Delaware River Basin Commission, and the state agencies defer to the Delaware River Basin Commission. And the result of that has been, again, economic development. If you were to go, again, I moved to the Philadelphia area about 35 years ago, and when I first moved down there, it was don't go near the river, don't drink the water. Don't swim, don't do it. Now you go down there, and my kids live down there. Everyone wants to be down by the water, and we scratch our heads now and say, how did we not take advantage of this amazing resource? If you go further upstream, we talked about some of the restrictiveness associated with the special protection waters. There are strict standards for special protection waters in our basin, very strict standards. But I can assure you that the Lehigh Valley is growing, and we work within the Lehigh Valley, and you can see the letters from the Lehigh Valley Authority here as to how we work with them to ensure that, again, we're not another DEP. We're a water resource management agency, so we look at the issues of quality and quantity. And the Lehigh Valley has grown, the Poconos areas have grown. And much of that is because it has valuable water resources. Even though, again, standards could be strict or considered strict, it clearly has an economic benefit. Finally, as I mentioned, we had 9,000 comments on the hydraulic fracturing rule. And clearly, the comments you will hear from the witnesses behind me and the comments that you've heard from the witnesses in front of me, they've all been reflected in those comments. Sorry about that. I've also gotten comments on the economic potential harm and the economic value of the basin and the resources that water brings into the basin. So we're dealing with both sides of the economic issue.
Could I, Mr. Chairman?
We are out of time for this testifier. Thank you, Representative Carter. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next testifier will be Mr. Tom Shepstone, Principal, Shepstone Management Company, Incorporated. You can begin when you're ready, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Tom Shepstone. I'm a professional planner from northeastern Pennsylvania. I have over 40 years' experience working with communities throughout the Commonwealth. I also represent numerous private clients, including some in the natural gas industry. I also publish a blog advocating for natural gas development in our region. And I'm a landowner with a natural gas lease that has been in limbo for nearly a decade. Like those who spoke before me, I'm here today for justice, equal justice under law. Those of us who reside and have to make a living in the Delaware River Basin have been denied that justice by the DRBC, usurping what is your authority. It's your job to reassert your authority and protect us from what is a purely political power play. The DRBC, which is run by the same governing majority of members as the SRBC, is picking economic winners and losers in Pennsylvania based on political ideology, something even you don't have the authority to do. The commission members are allowing natural gas development on the Susquehanna side of the mountain ridge and denying it on one side, the Delaware River Basin. This is despite the fact they have the evidence in hand from their own ongoing continuous water quality studies. And I would point out here that the key point here is not who has the authority to set standards, but who is actually monitoring the water quality and who is protecting it. It's the SRBC. The SRBC is allowing the fracking, and the result has been there is no discernible impact on the quality of water resources on the Susquehanna side. The DRBC ignored, absolutely ignored that evidence that the same governing majority has in their hands when they developed the justification for that fracking ban. That is outrageous. It's not equal justice under the law. They claim falsely the DRBC has additional authority and responsibility for water quality protection. They then propose to use it to ban an otherwise legal activity despite the evidence to the contrary from the SRBC experience. More importantly, they ignore the water quality standards already applied in both basins under the Clean Water Act and the Clean Streams Law. Standards any water user must meet without discrimination. The natural gas industry is able to meet the very highest of these, and in fact is. The representative from Williamsport, I wish he was still here, because he could tell you that they're doing it in exceptional value streams in Lycoming County right now and with no discernible impact. That is why, of course, the DRBC now seeks to throw those standards to the wind and impose a ban being imposed on no other industry or land use. That's not equal justice under the law. The DRBC proposes to abscond with the full value of the holdings of some property owners by enacting a ban on natural gas development. Those who only own natural gas rights, such as Betty's sisters, will lose 100% of what they own. Those property owners, who I might add possess the dominant legal estate under Pennsylvania law, will therefore have cause to file takings claims. They will, though, have lost all they own and may well not have the funds or endurance for the lawsuits necessary to get back what is rightfully theirs. That's not equal justice under the law. Not when the government can steal what is yours and force you to spend your estate on legal fees to get it back. It's simply theft. That's what it is, theft. It's also theft for those who own both land and natural gas rights. Why? Because regulating away those rights to leave landowners with only the residual value of the land for other uses must be based on some evidence of an actual case for regulation. Read the DRBC justification singling out one county in Pennsylvania to disallow natural gas development. You'll be shocked at how shallow it is, and I truly urge you to read it. Indeed, the DRBC justification barely exceeds ninth grade competency and logic. It argues, for example, the risk of accidents and spills is too big. Yet, I expected we'd have a pitcher of water here. There isn't one, but I know you get water in this building, and you don't necessarily get it from a bottle either. You can get it in a jug. And that water comes from the Susquehanna River Basin. Harrisburg is served by drinking water from the Susquehanna River Basin. You drink water from a basin that has had fracking in it, and yet you would serve it to me, serve it to others. Obviously, you don't think there's a problem with it. No one seriously worries about drinking, in fact. The proposed regulations, in fact, are based on purely speculative risks. Something happened in Wayne County last week, and in fact, it happened in Beaver County 4 years ago, that illustrates. A line painting truck lost control coming down a hill, sideswiped another vehicle, and tipped over into a pond, creating a hazmat situation as paint and fuel seeped into the pond. Same thing happened in Beaver County. It was a relatively big deal that brought out numerous agencies to supervise. Are we now to ban line painting? Are we to ban line painting trucks? There are myriad other examples of barge accidents on the lower Delaware, train derailments on the upper Delaware, which I'm very familiar with, truck accidents everywhere. These are accidents that result in stuff, bad stuff, going directly into the Delaware. There have been fires at chemical plants in the Delaware that have resulted in spills directly into the river. There have been overfeeds of chemicals into drinking water at treatment plants along the Delaware. Are we to ban all these things as well? Based on the mere speculation they might happen again? No, of course not. Only in the case of fracking does the DRBC insist a ban alone will do. That's not equal justice under the law. The DRBC also proposes regulations on the exporting of water to other basins for natural gas development that are stricter than the exports of water for other purposes. Think about that for a moment. If exports of water need to be governed, then why in the world wouldn't the same rule apply to all? It's patently clear from this the DRBC is acting ideologically and politically, not scientifically or in accordance with its compact. That's not equal justice under the law. There's also no equal justice when it comes to process. The DRBC has stacked almost all its committees with representatives of the Delaware Riverkeeper, a special interest, anti-gas advocacy group that sued it over gas drilling issues, and they put them on the committees. It has actually taken money from the same William Penn Foundation that has funded the Riverkeeper and numerous other anti-gas groups. Worse, it actually used the money to supposedly study gas issues and provide an excuse not to act on drilling regulations sitting on the shelf since 2011 with no end in sight. It's conflict and collusion everywhere with the DRBC. The DRBC state members have also engaged in a completely sham public hearing process with respect to this proposed fracking ban, with all 4 governors proudly, and I must say stupidly, announcing how they'll vote before the hearings even began. Where's the equal justice under the law in such sham hearings? The DRBC, in other words, is on an out-of-control plunge down the hill, just like that line painting truck in our county last week. It's on a slippery slope of ideological opposition to natural gas designed to appease certain political special interests. All rights, all law, and all justice have been sacrificed in the trip downhill. It's also assuming your police powers, deciding it has the power to control even land use within your jurisdiction. It is leaving you and us in the dust as it pulls more and more power to itself. Pulls it to the corridors, I might add, of an office building in West Trenton where unelected bureaucrats keep warm in the winter with a newly installed gas heating system. You can and must reassert your own authority, the authority to establish standards for natural gas development in all of Pennsylvania, not just those outside the DRBC region. Those standards can and are being met across Pennsylvania in sub-watersheds already classified as exceptional value and subject to the highest threshold criteria. If the DRBC supposes it needs even higher standards, let them develop them and apply them equally to all industries. The gas industry can meet them. It already meets them. There's no problem with that. They don't want equal justice. They want unequal justice. How do you do this? How do you solve this problem? Multiple legislative initiatives underway. House Bill 2222, I believe, Senate Bill 1189. To ensure Pennsylvania retains its sovereignty and property owners get paid for what they're being asked to sacrifice. I support both those bills. I also strongly suggest you take some other measures as well, including a reduction of Pennsylvania contributions to the DRBC to $1 a year. They're sitting on tens of millions of dollars of unreserved funds they're wasting on denying us our rights. Giving them more money is a sacrilege and insult to Pennsylvanians. I also suggest the legislature immediately initiate a professional study of how to extricate itself from the DRBC. The agency has outlived its usefulness. Pennsylvania is more impacted by it than any other state. It should assume the DRBC responsibilities itself, which it could presumably do if it honored its portion of any debt obligations. It could also enter into individual agreements with other states that do not compromise its sovereignty or sell out its citizens. It's time to take this step. It's time for equal justice under law. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony today. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Shepstone. I appreciate your testimony. A question for you. Your understanding of the science behind the dangers and the effective manner in which hydraulic fracturing can be conducted, is the science the same for the SRBC and the DRBC regions?
Well, they're both subject to water quality standards. The DRBC has a water quality program that they establish special protection waters. In the SRBC, it's a little bit different in that they have what are known as exceptional value and high quality streams, which is what essentially special protection waters are in the DRBC. So it's a little different language, but the end result is the same. You have the same basic water quality criteria applying, and they already exist. They already exist. And we know from the SRB experience, and they're the ones that are doing the big-time water quality monitoring. All this talk about the DRBC being worried about water quality, who's doing the water quality monitoring? It's the SRBC for a decade. And as a result of that, no discernible impact on the quality of water resources. And I find it highly unusual and almost insulting. The DRBC, we lectured here today, what a wonderful job they've done cleaning PCBs up. But they haven't cleaned them all up. So they're worrying about fracking in the Delaware when they have evidence from their own members that there's no problem with it in the Susquehanna, and instead of the PCBs, where are the priorities here?
The science is basically the same.
Yes.
But the treatment is different.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Representative McCarter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, just a couple of quick questions, and again, thank you for coming today.
Sure.
Mr. Shepstone. Are you aware that there are, following up on Representative Miller's question in terms of the science involved, that there are recent reports that have been issued that have say, and I'll quote from one of the reports, the existing surface water quality data in the SRB are insufficient to detect water quality change related to shale gas development.
Who says that?
It's one of the recent reports that came out.
I believe that report came through the Delaware Riverkeeper. And this is the kind of thing the Delaware Riverkeeper does all the time. There's a lot of junk science out there. I think
Well, it's from if I'm not mistaken, it's USGS and the Northeast Mideast.
No, they cited
Institute.
the USGS. I'm familiar with that quote. They cited the USGS report. They didn't. That is not an accurate rendering of what the USGS report says. There are numerous USGS reports, including some on what's going on in both Wayne County, Pike County, and in various parts of the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. Those reports do not indicate any serious problem with fracking. And I would also point out that one of the most common complaints was started with Gasland was about the methane problem, shallow methane migration. And in fact, the USGS reports for Pike and Wayne County show that's even there. That was a problem long before fracking.
If I understand also correctly, only 8% of Wayne County actually is the area that we're talking about here in terms of in the Delaware River Basin. Is that correct?
8%?
8%
of
the county is actually impacted.
Oh, no, it's more than that. Nobody knows until you do actual drilling and hydraulic fracturing as to how much there is. But I can tell you, I lease my property in Damascus Township, which is about a third of the way down the county. And I would say, based on what knowledge I have, and it's just preliminary stuff that's available to everybody, that it's probably from Route 371, which is kind of the dividing line between north and south, north. So it's much more than 8%.
And just one last question in terms of the impact of that, though, and you're saying it's more than 8%, however, I believe that's what has been developed. Have you seen the data that came back from those test drillings many years ago, 8 years ago, was done, and has that been presented to you?
I have not personally seen that. However, you know, we do know from, I've talked with, for example, Terry Engelder at Penn State. I've talked with him about it, and the answer is always the same, that until you do the drilling and the hydraulic fracturing, you really don't know what you have. It's all speculation. So I can tell you that, as Betty said earlier, companies are willing to come here, and in fact, one company has sued the DRBC because they intend to drill, and they cannot under the current regulations.
And are you part of any suits currently against the DRBC?
I'm not a part of a suit. I did put my land into a fund, or a portion of my land, to help support it, but I'm not one of the parties.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carter. Thank you, sir, for testifying today.
Thank you.
Our next testifier is Mr. David Spiegelmeyer, President of Marcellus Shale Coalition, and also one of my constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Metcalf, Chairman Bradford, members of the House State Government Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning regarding the significant negative economic ramifications of the moratorium placed on responsible unconventional shale gas development imposed by the Delaware River Basin Commission, DRBC. My name is Dave Spiegelmeyer. I'm the president of the Marcellus Shale Coalition, headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The MSC is a statewide trade association representing nearly 200 energy-producing, midstream, transmission, and small to medium-sized supply chain members who are fully committed to working with local, county, state, and federal government officials to facilitate the development of our natural gas resources in the Marcellus, Utica, and related shale formations here in Pennsylvania. As you may or may not know, Pennsylvania has become the second largest producer of natural gas in the United States, with over 8,000 producing unconventional or horizontally drilled wells, amounting to 5.36 trillion cubic feet of natural gas development in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is responsible for almost 20% of our country's natural gas production, as we produce gas and liquids in at least 33 of our 67 counties here in the Commonwealth. My testimony has been submitted to the record, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning. Since the unconventional industry began to ramp up in 2008, citizens of our Commonwealth have enormously benefited from this development. Consumer purchased natural gas rates in Pennsylvania have dropped anywhere from 57 to 81%, depending on which utility serves your area. Today, natural gas is the fuel of choice for power generation because of the enormous environmental benefits of burning this fuel and because of the robust supply of natural gas here in our Commonwealth. Gas is indeed now the primary fuel in generation, with wholesale electric costs down some 41% in PJM, saving the average customer in the Commonwealth $1,500 annually on their household electric bill. The savings for business and manufacturers are far greater. While some in the Capitol have attempted to minimize the jobs generated from our industry, more than 100,000 Pennsylvanians are directly or indirectly working in industry-related jobs, supporting hundreds of thousands of their family members and paying Pennsylvania income taxes here in the Commonwealth. Furthermore, nearly $1.5 billion in tax revenue has been paid by unconventional natural gas producers through Pennsylvania's unique impact fee, passed in 2012 and benefiting every single county in the Commonwealth. It was clear in 2012 that this unique approach of driving revenue into our county and local governments was Pennsylvania's version of a severance tax. It was and continues to be a winner for Pennsylvania and has dramatically outpaced the collections of our neighbors in Ohio and West Virginia, both with severance taxes. Through the impact fee, more than $400 million has been invested in statewide environmental initiatives, including $6 million to annually carve out to fund the DEP. Some lawmakers have commented the DEP does not have the adequate staffing to police this industry. Facts be known, Pennsylvania's natural gas industry is the only industry that self-funds DEP's oversight and staffing at the oil and gas section of it has tripled, growing from 60 compliance and inspection staff in 2008 to over 225 in 2011, number 2 in the United States for its size of its oil and gas compliance staff behind Texas. Today, the oil and gas section has a complement of 190 staff, and last year, with 812 wells drilled in the Commonwealth, the industry was inspected more than 16,000 times. Over $3 billion have been collected in other business, corporate, and income taxes generated by the natural gas industry. Over $1 billion has been paid directly to the Commonwealth for leasing and development of our natural gas resources underlying public-owned lands, including nearly $100 million collected annually to both DCNR and the Pennsylvania Game Commission in royalty revenue for state lands development. Over $1 billion has been invested in road infrastructure improvements, all funded by the industry. And what has been extraordinary has been the nearly $10 billion in royalty and bonus payments made to Commonwealth leaseholders, including many farmers who now have a path forward to the proceeds of natural gas development. Unfortunately, one can look to Wayne and Pike counties or to the southern tier of New York State to see the stark economic differences that this industry has made. Shale development has provided an influx of game-changing capital into many communities across our state. Unfortunately, Wayne and Pike counties have been excluded. Pennsylvania has also helped lead the United States in the reduction of emissions, thanks to increased use of natural gas in the power generation sector and in our transportation sector. Air quality has improved substantially and by historic proportions due to the increased utilization of natural gas. For example, according to Pennsylvania DEP, just between 2014 and 15, sulfur dioxide emissions declined by 25%, particulate emissions declined by 23%, and nitrogen oxide emissions declined by 19%. Additionally, according to the US EPA, carbon emissions are a 25-year low. And most importantly, natural gas can and has made a huge difference across the globe. However, today, 1.3 billion people across our planet live in energy poverty, meaning they have no available fresh running water that we take for granted and rely upon each and every day. They have no sewage systems or refrigeration to store their foods and keep them fresh. They have no advanced medical care and medications manufactured through the use of natural gas that are life-sustaining, and many energy-starved regions heat their huts with wood and dung when temperatures are cold, and when hot, they have no cooling. As a result, those living in energy poverty have much shorter lifespans than the residents of countries like us living in a land of energy abundance and affordability. Our enormous newfound supplies of natural gas can and will power the planet and change the human condition for millions if we're allowed to prosper. In the area of the resource potential in this region, while I cannot exactly predict what the resource potential of unconventional shale gas is within the Delaware River Basin, we have a reason to believe it's significant. One of the earliest state publications examining the natural gas potential of the Marcellus Shale was published in the spring of 2008 by the Bureau of Topographic and Geologic Survey of the DCNR. The report examined historical data on shale gas exploratory wells in Pennsylvania, some dating back 70 years. The report observed the key to the prolific natural gas production is the higher than normal gamma ray responses found in gamma ray logs, which is the indicative of rich organic shales. Contrary to the conventional belief that the thickness of the shale is the greatest indicator of gas potential, the report concluded that we should be looking for where it's most rich in organic matter. Importantly, the report noted that while the Marcellus Shale underlies much of Pennsylvania, the organic rich portion reaches its maximum development in the northeastern part of the state. Indeed, an accompanying map illustrating the thickness of sequence of organic rich shale shows some of the greatest thickness of Marcellus Shale throughout all of Wayne County and the northwestern part of Pike County. DCNR's 2008 report didn't get everything correct. The report noted that the Marcellus will probably not be quite as productive as the hype suggests, and that the peak petroleum production for the United States is past. A decade later, we know these assertions to be flatly false. Due to a new horizontal drilling technology and greater understanding of the resources beneath our feet, we now find ourselves in a period of over-reliance of energy from foreign nations, many of them not friendly to our country, to a period now of energy security where the United States can fully meet our own energy needs and help supply the world. And if one looks geographically, the county seat of Wayne County, Honesdale, is just 45 miles from Montrose, the county seat of Susquehanna County. Why do I bring this to your attention? Susquehanna County may have some of the most prolific dry natural gas shale wells that exist in the world today. While a direct correlation cannot be predicted, there's a strong probability that significant resource potential exists in the Wayne and Pike County region. Tunkhannock, the county seat of Wyoming County, is also just an hour's drive from Honesdale, or a short 45 miles in distance. In 2010 and 2011, mineral leases were taken in Wyoming County and bonus payments paid to mineral owners that topped $5,000 an acre in many cases. Those fees were paid to reserve the right to one-day drill on a property held by a lease. Leases taken in that region were economically game-changing for private mineral owners, including farmers and residents of the counties. In 2013, when speaking of the economic potential, Hess and Newfield, two leading natural gas producers, announced that after 4 years of uncertainty and stagnation by the DRBC, they were leaving Pennsylvania. More than $150 million had been invested in Northeast Pennsylvania to secure leases, planned for development, and drilled several exploratory wells. Yet, with no end to the uncertainty and a de facto moratorium in sight, the companies vacated those leases and the economic opportunities lost for those mineral owners. Economically, this inability to develop the resource was devastating. Initial bonus lease payments totaled over $100 million, but another nearly $187 million was never paid due to the invocation of force majeure. Over 1,500 leases affecting thousands of landowners were terminated. The total economic impact of the region, the loss of up to $8 million into the local economy per well, and hundreds of million dollars in lost royalty revenue is impossible to calculate. As for DRBC, we need to look no further than the Susquehanna River Basin to realize the absurdity of the DRBC's actions. For more than a decade now, the SRBC has safely managed water resources while allowing for responsible development of property rights. Indeed, the unconventional natural gas industry has worked closely with the SRBC to ensure that our operations, our water withdrawals, and our water usage within the basin are done in a safe and responsible manner. SRBC has adopted the regulatory framework that is workable, flexible, and protects our water resources and respects the need of other users. To date, the DRBC has squandered this incredible opportunity and neglected their obligation to build a similar relationship with industry in order to mirror responsible development within that basin. This decade of experience, bolstered by repeated scientific studies undertaken by SRBC, has demonstrated that unconventional natural gas development has occurred within the Susquehanna River Basin with no discernible impact on our water resources. This is a testament to both our industry, our DEP, and the SRBC, and a model that should have been emulated within the DRBC. The uncertainty created by government, and indeed the actions of the DRBC, has stripped away the many opportunities presented to local residents through the action of imposing a moratorium in the DRBC, or in the Delaware River Basin. Make no mistake, the landowners and property owners of Wayne and Pike counties have suffered under this moratorium, not to mention the loss of communities in Pike and Wayne counties that were hopeful to enjoy their economic opportunities as witnessed in neighboring shale-producing counties in the Susquehanna River Basin. Today, capital is being invested in other shale opportunities in Pennsylvania, with our neighbors to the south and west in West Virginia and Ohio, as well as other shale-producing regions across the country. At the end of the day, capital investment will be made somewhere. In this case, like we've seen in New York State, is with the local residents who are deprived of these economic benefits the most. The farmers and business owners need government on their side, not stripping them of their rights and taking away their economic property rights. We have already lost 10 years of capital investment in this region. We've starved our nation of the added resources to move us closer to position of complete energy security for our country. We also know that 10 years of job opportunities, lease bonus payments, and royalty income for landowners has been lost. This has translated itself into deferred retirements, deferred college, inability to pass down the family farm, a loss of stronger and more vibrant communities, and many other detriments that need not have happened if the DRBC had simply done its job instead of playing politics with the people's livelihoods. I appreciate the committee shining a light on this important matter, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Our first question would be Representative Bradford.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, sir. I'm going to circle back, actually, to following up on a point that Representative McCarter made as well. And one of the things that Mr. Shepstone and I believe actually our first speaker talked about is kind of the politicization of science in this regard. And, you know, we can't all have our own facts. So the report I believe Representative McCarter was talking about was entitled Water Data to Answer Urgent Water Policy Questions, a report published by the Northwest Institute in collaboration with the U.S. Geological Society. I believe it's on, in the summary, I guess that's Roman numeral, page 4. Among the significant findings of the case study are the following. And it actually goes, the preface to that is in this report, the NEWMI, in cooperation with the USGS, investigates the minimum quality of water quality data that would be necessary to detect a statistically significant change in water quality related to shale gas development in the Susquehanna River Basin, and analyzes whether those data are currently being generated. Among the significant findings of the case study are the following. The existing surface water quality data in the Susquehanna River Basin Commission are insufficient to detect water quality change related to shale gas development. It goes on to make other points, and I will say it's not a slam dunk one way or the other, and I'm not here to tell you I'm an expert on this particular report or that I've read it cover to cover, because I have not. But one of the things that is problematic in this debate is there is a lack of, frankly, trust, and largely in my neck of the woods, and I'll be the first to admit that, in southeastern Pennsylvania, the industry is often looked at with some suspicion. The Act 13 debacle was not a real confidence-building time for many of us in the Southeast who have questions about the industry and believe that this is problematic. But when I think I've heard, and I heard the same quote used by yourself as well as others who are advocates for the industry talking about no discernible impact on the water quality, there's obviously a USGS study that kind of says something different. It says the jury's out. And I think we should be honest about that. I do believe science should drive this. Listen, I think your industry has a role to play when we talk about climate change. But I see an industry that sometimes is not willing to use science as the arbiter of how we do public policy in related issues of great environmental impact to the Commonwealth and, frankly, to our nation and our world. So I think there's a lack of trust in this issue that really stands out. You mentioned an impact fee, which many of us believe is de minimis and has almost no revenue coming into my neck of the woods. And again, I don't begrudge those parts of the Commonwealth that are doing quite well under the impact fee. But when we talk about opening up a river basin that the water that southeastern Pennsylvania gets would be greatly impacted, that impact fee does nothing. A robust severance tax, which industry has fought against vociferously and irrationally for a decade. You talk about missed opportunities. I think that's one of the great missed opportunities of all time. So I know the chairman's going to be upset that I don't have much of a question here.
You don't have any question, you just have a lecture.
I got questions.
So if you can get to the questions, I think Representative Miller might have another question.
Let me get to the question. Listening to what I've said, do you think I have any point, or is this just misguided and this is just the ramblings of those who oppose fracking irrationally? Because I would tell you that I don't think all of us are irrational. I think there's science on both sides that need to be noted and taken into consideration. And when we play this game of your scientist versus mine and your MSNBC versus my Fox News, I think we do a real disservice to the public.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to respond to your question. First of all, I was born and raised in central Pennsylvania in the heart of natural gas development country. I grew up in Clearfield County. I'm active in a number of organizations that are focused on conservation and protect our environment. I would tell you, we organized the Marcellus Shale Coalition with the primary purpose of advancing regulation for our industry. We knew we needed to modernize regulations for this industry, and I think we have the most robust framework for development of shale resources of any place in the country. Do I think that shale resources are being developed in an environmental responsible fashion? I do, and I think over 16,000 inspections at 812 well locations last year is indicative of a 97% rate of acceptance for drilling in a favorable fashion with our environmental rules of the Commonwealth. When it comes to shale gas development and taxation that was mentioned over and over again, we have the highest corporate net income tax rate in the country. We have an impact fee that was passed in 2012. Clearly in House Bill 1950, if you read the statute again, there's evidence to suggest that the legislature felt this was our version of a severance tax because it states in there that if a severance tax passes at some future date, the impact fee goes away. That was the intention of the legislature because they knew it was the approach. What's seldom mentioned is more than 40% of the proceeds are carved off to fund state agencies, included in $6 million that goes to DEP to self-fund that agency. Again, we're number 2 in sized inspection staff of any agency in the country over oil and gas development. I think it's the only part of the agency that's specifically designated for one specific industry. We have an oil and gas section broken down in the region that has a specific role to play in oversight of natural gas development. I think we're doing it right. I think we've made game-changing opportunities. I think it's a crying shame that the residents of Wayne and Pike County haven't had the opportunity to enjoy the same benefits that other parts of the Commonwealth have.
Thank you, Representative Bradford. Representative Ryan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. May I ask a question of Representative Bradford, if I could?
Representative Ryan, so time to ask questions of the testifier. If we started asking Representative Bradford questions based on his answers, we could be here the rest of the day, and we do have session at 1.
Very
good.
Smarter for it, though.
Very good, thank you. No, the reason I was asking is that, and I'll go to the question, is that there is a U.S. Geological Survey and there's a U.S. Geological Society, and they are different groups, and I wasn't sure which one he's referring to. Do you, by any chance, know?
I think the comment Chairman Bradford mentioned was society, not the U.S. Geological Survey.
Because one is a governmental agency and one is not.
It raised
Representative Bradford, would you like to question?
Necessarily make statement.
Representative Bradford, which one did you mention? Was it a society, sir?
Survey, sir.
Fantastic, thanks. Because that helps me then for later on. But then the questions I actually have then relate to this issue is that, you know, those of us in rural areas and in south central Pennsylvania and other areas have a different take on this, and obviously than our dear friends in the southeast. And you know, we've seen situations where the impact fee is designed to help our communities because that's where the natural gas is being drilled. And in my mind, it was a logical approach to an issue. A severance tax in my mind, a much more deeper constitutional perspective of who really is the owner of those resources. And so such as I would be vehemently opposed to a severance tax. But when you look at this area and these issues about the DRBC, the theft of property rights, and it's a sensitive area, and I know people in other areas may not feel as empathetic towards us as possible, but we're struggling. As Warren County had happened about the reduction in the number of farms and things like that, we're seeing the same thing in my area. And so, I applaud the testimony, and hopefully we can come up with a successful resolution to it, because the theft of property rights and the liberty of those assets that are owned by the individual that are then taken by a committee that's not even represented in the state, and we have limited opportunity to have any recourse to it, gives us, I think, the responsibility as a legislative body to say we should not be delegating that type of authority over Commonwealth citizens without having some ability to deal with it. So the question I would ask you is that have you done any economic analysis of the amount of harm that's been done to that area that the DRBC is dealing with from this moratorium that has not been something that's been approved by the legislative bodies or the executive branch?
I think it would be a determination based upon the kind of production we would find, and although the circumstances look very good, we don't have a good analysis that I would share with you. There was a previous comment that I think relates here, is that there was how come drillers weren't drilling in 2009 and 10 when this industry began? There was an executive director determination, May 19th of 2009, and a supplemental executive director determination on June 10th of 2010 that basically placed a de facto moratorium in place for development in that region. It basically took away those property rights, and it's been under litigation since back in 2009 when this industry was first getting off the ground. So companies that had invested, a number of those companies I've had a chance to work closely with, one of them I worked directly for, had leases taken in Wayne County and basically lost their economic investment in that region as a result.
Thank you, Representative Ryan. Thank you, Mr. Spiegelmeier, for testifying today. We appreciate it.
Chairman, appreciate it.
Have a good day, sir. Our next and last testifier for today's hearing is Mr. Ned Lang, Vice President, Pennsylvania Septic Management Association and President of the Upper Delaware River Basin Citizens. You can begin when you're ready, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I want to thank Chairman Metcalf and Chairman Bradford for this opportunity to speak to representatives, and also Senator Baker's office for allowing us the time today to give our testimony. I'm president of the Upper Delaware River Basin Citizens Association and vice president of the Pennsylvania Septic Management Association. I come before you today, though, as president of the Upper Delaware River Basin Citizens Association, which represents the landowners throughout the Delaware River Basin, their rights, lifestyle, and heritage. Our organization is comprised of the landowners whom are responsible for the clean air, water, and overall quality of the environment that we all enjoy today. We are the stewards of the land, many of whom have lived, worked, and raised their families in the Delaware Basin for generations. The UDRBC is in support of sustainable natural gas exploration throughout the basin, just like our neighbors in the Susquehanna River Basin. The 2015 report by the SRBC Executive Director states, based on the analysis of the SRBC's nutrient and sedimentation data, the health of the Susquehanna overall is improving. The fact that 3 commissioners on the SRBC who voted yes to natural gas exploration, yet on the DRBC vote no to natural gas exploration because they care so much about the water quality in Delaware River, are exposed or about to be exposed for who and what they are. It's a facade, nothing more than a lie. Let me tell you why. The Barnes landfill is an abandoned landfill built on the side of the mountain back in 1947 overlooking the Delaware River in Berryville, New York. It was operated until approximately 1989 and was in the closure process until the money ran out in 2003. New York State then found the pollutants contained in the landfill were so hazardous that they declared it a Superfund site in 2004. Apparently, no further work for closure and containment were undertaken, and the leachate, thousands of gallons per day, was allowed to flow from the base of the landfill into the nearby creek, then into the Delaware, not a quarter mile away. Unfortunately, it is still flowing into the Delaware as we speak. You can go to YouTube, Barnes Landfill Leachate, and see for yourself. I became aware of this environmental nightmare in 2012 and wrote a letter to Governor Cuomo. It's my Exhibit A, and copied every governor and attorney general from every state affected downstream, as well as Carol Collier, the former director of the DRBC, alerting them to this environmental tragedy. I'd like to read you an excerpt from the letter to Governor Cuomo, which reads as follows. I've written you numerous letters in the past year and a half pointing out just how hypocritical you are when it comes to protecting New Yorkers and our fellow Americans downstream in the Delaware River Basin. I have learned that there is not one landfill Superfund site, but 2 landfill Superfund sites in the Delaware River Basin that are spewing their hazardous compounds into the drinking water of millions of people downstream. In March of 2011, Willie Janeway, the director of New York State Region 3 Department of Environmental Conservation, came to my DEC Part 360 solid waste facility, and we traveled down to the Old Barnes landfill in Berryville, New York, and we walked through the site. I showed him exactly where at the base of the landfill, the large holding tank would overflow, dumping thousands, ultimately millions of gallons of contaminated hazardous waste effluent from the collection system down through the woods, crossing numerous private properties into a brook, and shortly thereafter into the Delaware River. Mr. Janeway assured me that the New York State DEC would be taking some sort of action to mitigate the problem, preventing these chemicals and pollutants from entering the drinking water of millions of Americans downstream. However, to date, nothing has been done, and this landfill continues to spew its pollutants into the Delaware River on a daily basis for the past decade. It is almost beyond comprehension, however. I only received one reply to my letter, and that was from a New York State DEC staff person, Martin Brand. I have his letter marked as Exhibit B for your review. I would like to read you a small excerpt from the New York State staff from Mr. Brand. The Barnes landfill site is a former private municipal landfill operated from 1947 to 1989, regulated under the Solid Waste Rules 6 NYCRR Part 360. The site is not an inactive hazardous waste disposal site or Superfund site, and there is no indication that hazardous materials were ever disposed of in a landfill. The department is aware that there are continuing issues over the control of leachate from the leachate collection system and leachate storage tanks. You pointed out these concerns during a site visit with then Regional Director William Janeway back in March of 2011. My staff from the Division of Material Management subsequently inspected the site in 2011. These inspections revealed some concerns regarding the stability of the soil cover and vegetative layers of the existing synthetic geomembrane. The geomembrane is exposed in several areas, though it is apparently intact and functioning, and leachate was observed in the vicinity of the leachate storage tank and down gradient property line. The vegetation is uncontrolled due to lack of routine maintenance. While a significant concern, none of the areas exhibit the magnitude of potential environmental impact as characterized in your letter. Our inspections have not revealed any leachate or groundwater discharges to the Delaware River tributaries or other surface water bodies, and we have not observed damage to neighboring properties. It should be noted that the leachate flows at the site, while still of concern, have improved markedly since the cap was completed in May of 1992. He just contradicted himself. We are evaluating appropriate actions to solve the problem noted by you and my staff. With our assistant, the New York State Office of the Attorney General is investigating past and current owners and potentially responsible parties that could be approached from a legal perspective to take responsibility for the site. As you know, the escrow fund established years ago to provide funds for maintenance has been depleted. Unfortunately, there are currently no funding mechanisms available to the state for these types of situations. That's unbelievable. So New York State, with a $96 billion budget in 2004, didn't and still isn't doing the right thing. And the DRBC, with $30 million in the bank, won't spend a dollar protecting the drinking water of millions of people downstream. How many people south of Berryville, New York, have suffered health effects from exposure to the Superfund leachate over the past 15 years? We will never know. However, litigation may be the only answer to stop this travesty and hold these individuals, states, and the DRBC accountable for poisoning millions of people downstream who the DRBC was chartered for and give the responsibility of ensuring clean water to drink, fish, and recreate in. That's my Exhibit C. I find this statement from Governor Cuomo's Department of Environmental Conservation staff most reprehensible, callous, and irresponsible. I know firsthand how concerned the New York State DEC was with the containment and treatment of this leachate, as my environmental company performed services for Mr. Liguori, whom owned the landfill from the mid-90s until he passed away prior to 2003. It was during the closure of the landfill we had a heavy rain event. It was impossible to contain and remove the leachate flowing to the two 5,000-gallon holding tanks. The leachate overflowed from these tanks just one time, and the New York DEC arrested Mr. Liguori, hit him with a felony charge and a heavy fine for violating the Federal Clean Water Act. Mr. Liguori passed away soon after this. This is Exhibit D. Governor Cuomo is a commissioner of the DRBC and has stated he will vote for the fracking ban, along with current governors of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, with the pretense they are concerned about the water quality of the Delaware River and the possibility of a potential accident if natural gas exploration is allowed in the basin. The hypocrisy and arrogance of these governors is shameful and is a rallying cry for landowners and the politicians who represent us throughout the basin. The DRBC is an agenda-driven, rogue federal agency bullied by biased, self-serving environmentalists that operate at the whim of organizations such as the William Penn Foundation that do their bidding. Why has the Delaware Riverkeeper or the Catskill Mountain Keeper, whom they claim are champions of the environment, why are they not campaigning like our organization, the UDRBC, to clean up the Barnes landfill and prevent leachate from a New York State Superfund site from entering the Delaware River, potentially harming so many people downstream? It's my Exhibit E. I'm presenting these facts to the PA State Government Committee to illustrate the hypocrisy of the DRBC so you can better understand the intent of the DRBC, which is not about water quality in the Delaware Basin. It's about their true agenda, which is about regulation, control, and incursion into the sovereignty of Pennsylvania law. On behalf of all Pennsylvania landowners in the Delaware River Basin, we implore you to protect the sovereignty of Pennsylvania law, our rights as landowners, and hold the DRBC responsible for allowing the pollution of the drinking water of millions of Pennsylvanians downstream for a decade and a half. That's my presentation, and I thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Mr. Lang, members with questions? No member on the committee has a question, but Representative Mao is ready to ask a question.
Yes, thank you, man. I appreciate it. That's the second time I've heard that story. I just leaned over and looked at the executive director and said, is that true? Do they know about this? Have anybody testified directly to the DRBC about this landfill leaching this poison directly into a stream that goes directly into the Delaware River?
Yes, sir.
So they are on notice about it, and they are doing nothing.
Nothing. And I wrote, in this letter, I copied Carol Collier. This is 2012. I copied there. Carol Collier, Executive Director, Delaware River Basin Commission, P.O. Box 7360, West Trenton, New Jersey. She got a copy of this letter. That's 2012.
So it's been leaking in there since before 2012.
Yes, sir.
So we're at least since when?
2004, exactly. That's when
so we're 14 years in to this thing leaching in this poison. And DRBC is expending their energy, putting a moratorium on drilling, which there's absolutely no documentation yet that's even killed a fish, let alone poison an aquifer or a water system. And they're sitting back idle, letting this day by day, rainstorm by rainstorm, leach directly into the Delaware River. And they're walking around touting that they're environmentalists.
I did a site inspection with another member a month ago. And yes, I can personally tell you that leachate is bubbling right up and running right across Kittatinny Canoe's property, right straight into the Beaver Brook,
and this
straight
is,
into the Delaware.
All this is non-debatable. This has definitely happened. It's not a story. It's definitely something.
Go right to YouTube, sir.
I don't think hypocritical even comes close to describing the ideology behind this, but thank you very much. Thank you. We did stray away, however, from the original intent of the bill, which is fine, because I really needed to hear a lot of this because I am in the SRBC area myself. But this just goes to prove that at least drilling holes in the ground, which is my bill addresses, we need to bring that home and stop letting hypocrites, especially from other states, dictate how we do business here in Pennsylvania. I think that would be my closing argument to the chairman, and hopefully move this bill forward, amend it so that we can absolutely bring it home, lay it on the governor's desk and say, now, Governor, make your choice. Are you standing behind the people of Pennsylvania, or are you standing behind a bunch of hypocrites? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Mao. Have you had any correspondence with Governor Wolf as chairman of the Delaware River Basin Commission related to the leaching issue?
No, sir. I wrote this letter back in 2012. I testified in Waymart. I brought this to their attention. I brought it to the DRBC's attention I presented this at the hearings in Waymart. So twice now I've talked about it, and this is the third time publicly. So before the meeting up in Waymart, before the Republican caucus, I believe, John, right? Policy, and then I also testified at the DRBC hearings in Waymart during the hearing process about the fracking ban.
She testified before the Republican Policy Committee?
Yes.
Related to it? Okay.
And at the DRBC hearings in Waymart, and now again today.
So there was a Delaware River Basin Commission hearing that you testified to this fact?
And also...
So it's part of the testimony that they received related to the regulatory process that they're engaging in, or proposed regulations that they might initiate.
I also gave Secretary McDonald a copy of the complete file. I have a complete, really thick file of all of the inner workings between my company and the DEC for approximately 10 years until the money ran out in 2003, 2004. And when I met with Secretary McDonald on behalf of our organization, UDRBC, he also received a complete dossier, if you will.
So you met with him personally and gave him the information
Yes, sir.
that this leaching is an issue still?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony today.
Well,
so thank you to the members for their time. We'll look forward to following up with members as we consider the information received today. Motion to adjourn by Representative Ryan, second by Representative Bradford. This meeting's adjourned. Everyone have a good day.